Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, welcome to Amaqhawe Ethu series of lectures on the contribution of heroic individuals in the struggle for liberation of South Africa. Today, we are hosting Ubawo Ntenteni, Utami Ntenteni, who is going to be sharing with us about the life of Kenneth Kaunda. As we all know that the big tree has fallen, umthomkhulu uwile, iqala lenkululeko, umxhasi wabalweli inkululeko kuMzantsi Afrika. Ngethamsanqa uba uNtenteni unayo imbali ngeli qhawe, unayo imbali ngale nkokheli nanjengamntu bebesebenzisana kunye naye phandle emazweni. Namhlanje ke sinelo thamsanqa nalo ntsikelelo yokubana sifumane eli qala liphinda ukuza kulo moya wethu nakwesi sihlalo samaqhawe ethu. Uba uNtenteni ndiyakwamkela ndinguyongamela Manene on behalf of amaqhawe ethu ukubana usityebisele usirhabulise ngobawo uKK. Enkosi kakhulu, over to you.
Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this lecture of Amaqhawe Ethu on the life and times of KK, the late president of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda. You know, I think that I consider ourselves to be lucky that we're living during these times of change, and I think we need for future generations and the younger people to be able to locate these people enibabiza ngokuthi ngamaqhawe ethu, abantu abalwele inkululeko yase-South Africa nenkululeko yase-Southern Africa nje generally. I think these are very, very interesting times, and I think those of us who had the opportunity and the privilege to participate or witness these events can consider ourselves lucky because we're living during times of change. Our focus today is on the late president of Zambia, Kenneth KK Kaunda. I want us to locate KK within a particular historical period and time. Zambia got its independence in October 1964. And before saying that, before going there, let me just say that it is quite ironic for me that President Kaunda passes on the 17th of June, 2021, as we were marking 45 years of the Soweto uprising here in South Africa and the people who supported us all over the world. I think that is very, very important. And I think the other thing that needs to be said here is that even as we use epithets such as the giant KK Kaunda is fallen, the baobab tree, the African baobab tree has fallen, and the colossus and the titan of the liberation struggle we must also take into consideration that we must not isolate President Kaunda from the other leaders of the African continent with whom he operated. I'm thinking here that we're talking of a period in which you had other leaders such as Abdel Nasser of Egypt. You had Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. You had Amilcar Cabral, Guinea-Bissau. You had Julius Nyerere of Tanzania. You had Patrice Lumumba of the Republic of the Congo. You had here in South Africa. You had Nelson Mandela. You had Oliver Tambo. You had in Algeria Ben Bella and Houari Boumediene. All of these leaders, I think, together with KK, represent a particular generation, and that generation defined its mission, and that mission was the total liberation of Africa. I think it was Nkrumah who said that Ghana cannot be considered free unless the whole of Africa is free, right from the Cape to the Cairo. Now, these leaders, if you take Southern Africa, if we look at Southern Africa in particular, Zambia gained its independence in 1964. And some of these countries also gained their independence in the early 1960s. Ghana is the one that gained its independence just a little bit earlier, I think, just in the close of the 50s. If I'm correct, it must be 1956, if my memory serves me well. But Southern Africa, the struggle for liberation raged right up to, let's say, 1994. Now, the importance of the role of President Kaunda and the significance of the role that he played is that if you look at all of these liberation movements, whether you look at Angola, or you look at Mozambique, or you look at Zimbabwe, or you look at Namibia, or you look at South Africa, all of these liberation movements operated from Zambia. And Zambia was important from its geographic location. It was centrally situated, and therefore, from a geographic point of view, all of this liberation movement operated in one way or the other from Zambia. Now, I was saying that earlier, Zambia gained its independence in 1964. And 5 years down the line, in 1969, you had a conference of East African leaders, which met in Lusaka, Zambia. Out of that conference came out a document which was then called the Lusaka Manifesto. I am starting from this period because I am drawing attention to the fact that it is only 5 years that Zambia had gained its independence under the leadership of President Kaunda. But Zambia did not say, hey guys, wait a minute, we have our own problems here. We have a colonial legacy that we need to sort out. No, 5 years down the line, in 1969, I think it was in April, this conference is held in Zambia. And amongst other things, this conference resolves that there is no government in any way where a minority can take over the reins of power and rule over a people without their consent. That people must have the right of self-determination to determine their own affairs and to participate in the affairs of their country and to have the opportunity to elect their own government. Now, you will realize that at this point, I'm talking about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Charter of Human Rights. The Lusaka Declaration, the Lusaka Manifesto went further to say that if it was possible, it would support it. If it was possible, it would prefer the resolution of the problems of Southern Africa through peaceful means. But if not, then the oppressed peoples of these countries reserve the right to use whatever means available to them or whatever means at their disposal in order to overthrow colonial domination, racism, and colonial oppression. Now, historical experience teaches that freedom is never given. Freedom is never achieved simply out of the benevolence of the colonial oppressors. Freedom is fought for. Freedom is achieved through the use of force. Now, we can define force in a variety of ways, but let us say the resistance of the people actually forced the hand of the oppressors. Now, in talking about Southern Africa, it was the Rhodesian leader at the time, Ian Smith, who made the statement. I think it was in 1970. He made the statement to the effect that he does not believe in black majority rule for Rhodesia, and that there would be no majority rule in Rhodesia for the next 1,000 years. Now you can imagine that the level of arrogance with which Ian Smith was saying that. But suffice it to say that in less than 10 years, or just about 10 years, in 1980, Zimbabwe was free under the leadership of the Patriotic Front. But before we get to that, let us now look at the situation within Southern Africa. And remember that I have said 1969, the Lusaka Conference. Throughout this period, Zambia plays a critical and important role in the liberation struggle of Southern Africa. At the time, 1969, Angola was still under Portuguese colonialism. Mozambique was also still under Portuguese colonialism. Rhodesia, as I have said, under Smith, who had declared unilateral independence in 1965. Namibia under South African occupation, South Africa under apartheid rule and racist colonial domination. So Southern Africa, all of Southern Africa was under colonial rule, with the exception of the northern parts and the central parts. However, the Lusaka Declaration became a game plan. It became a guiding document under which the struggle in Southern Africa was waged. It is important then that to say soon thereafter, from 1969, in 1974, Mozambique gained its independence from Portuguese colonialism. And Kaunda had played, Kaunda, Nyerere, and all of these others in their individual capacities and also under the auspices of the Organization of African Unity, played a prominent role in the achievement of independence in these countries. 1974, Mozambique gains its independence. 1975, Angola gains its independence from Portuguese colonialism. And I think also these events had an impact on the struggles in South Africa and in Zimbabwe and in Namibia. You will remember that I think it was in 1975 here in South Africa where we had the Prof. Relimo rally organized under the auspices of SASO. And out of that rally, a number of SASO leaders were arrested, or the SASO 13 as they came to be known, because the spirit of resistance and the spirit of struggle was given a booster by the independence of these countries. So we can say, without fear of contradiction, that the struggle begins to escalate in the period of the 1970s. 1974, Mozambique. 1975, Angola. 1976, you then have the Soweto uprisings, June 16th, Soweto uprising. And consequently, a number, or quite a large number of young people leave the country to join the African National Congress. I'm going to speak more of the African National Congress because that's what I know really. And there were some who went and joined other liberation movements such as the Pan-Africanist Congress. But I'm not oblivious of that fact, but I can only speak in terms of the African National Congress, of which I was a member and of which I know much better about these events. So you had a number of people, a large number of young people who left the country in 1976 to join the liberation movements. And many of these young people ended up in Zambia. I myself spent 17 years of my life in Zambia. So in a sense, Zambia became a home away from home. The ANC had its headquarters in Zambia for 30 years. Oliver Tambo had a residence in Zambia, And that residence today is a museum, which is a testimony of the contribution of Zambia under the leadership of President Kaunda to the liberation struggle in Zambia. Now, it is important that we should also say that at this point in time, the Rhodesians actually launched a number of campaigns, military campaigns and incursions into Zambia in an attempt to destroy ZIPRA, which was operating from there. After the Mozambican liberation, the Rhodesian forces also invaded Mozambique in an attempt to actually destroy ZANU, whose forces were operating from Mozambique. So, in actual fact, the liberation of Mozambique and Angola allowed the barrier or the buffer around South Africa to actually fall. So we then we were then able, in 1980, as I say, Zimbabwe becomes independence. And now we are faced with South Africa and Namibia, which still remain under colonial rule. You must remember that Namibia was actually occupied by South Africa, which was defying Resolution 435 of the United Nations that they must leave, South Africa must leave. They must leave Zambia. They must leave Namibia and grant the people of Namibia their independence. And so this is where we are at the period of the 1980s, and central to the struggles of the Southern African people is the role that President Kaunda and Zambia is playing during this period in time. And as I have said, it was not easy for Zambia. Zambia's economy suffered heavy blows from the incursions by the Rhodesian forces. Now, as we go into the period of the 80s, we will then see an escalation of the struggle now in South Africa itself, leading to the period of 1994. I will stop here at this point in time, and then we will continue.